Okay. Welcome, everyone, to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Alok Kanoja. I'm a psychiatrist. Just a reminder that although I'm a psychiatrist, nothing we discuss on stream today is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Today, it's going to be more educational and hopefully not very entertaining. If you'll have a concern about your mental health, please go see a licensed professional. There's one additional warning which we're going to give today is we're going to be talking about non-consensual pornography. We're going to be talking about things related to sexuality with a focus primarily on stuff like deepfakes, revenge porn, and non-consensual pornography. So if that's something that concerns you or is emotionally dangerous for you, please exercise caution. So I want to kind of take a step back and talk a little bit about why we're streaming today. So sometimes on the internet, there's drama. And when there's drama, we actually try really hard to steer clear of it. A big part of what we do here at Healthy Gamer is not talk about people. One of our central principles is that we think you should talk to people. And half the problem with the internet right now is that everyone opines, everyone has opinion, everyone says what other people should and shouldn't be doing. We try really hard to step away from that and actually talk to the people who are involved to hear their experience of things. This is something that I learned to value originally when I was in India, absolutely learned to value it 10 times over as a psychiatrist, that you actually need to talk to people and listen to people about what their experience of a particular thing is. The reason that we're talking about today about non-consensual pornography, deepfakes, revenge porn, and all that kind of stuff is because there's a lot of science actually out there which very few people know. The reason that we're choosing to open our mouths today is because I think a lot of people really need to understand what impact this has. Because we've heard a lot of people say, hey, this is harmful to me. And we've also heard a lot of people say it shouldn't be, right? You didn't actually participate in it. You don't have to watch it. We hear all these kinds of statements. So I'm going to start off by sharing a little bit about the research. So the first thing is that if you look at the research on this kind of stuff, there's actually a research term called non-consensual pornography. And why do they call it that? It's because kind of like revenge porn falls under that, but it's basically what are the psychological impacts of pornography that doesn't have the consent of the people involved. So there's one study that shows that after non-consensual pornography is released, over half of the people who are involved want to kill themselves. That's crazy. So for the record, 90% of people who are in non-consensual pornography are women, 10% are men, about. And this is like a one-time thing that leads to suicidal ideation in over 50% of people. In addition to all kinds of crap around PTSD, anxiety, depression, all that stuff gets worse. But there are very few things I've seen as a psychiatrist that a single event causes someone to go from 0% suicidality all the way to suicidal ideation. And this is a common experience, right? So this happens in over 50% of people who have non-consensual pornography made about them or released about them. So the first thing is that if you're thinking, oh, this isn't that bad, actually the data suggests it is. And here's the other reason why I want y'all to really take a step back and think about this. Because when it comes to stuff like deepfakes, you can have an opinion. I can have an opinion. Research on the negative impacts of deepfakes, we're not really sure when that'll come out. We actually have a lot about non-consensual pornography, which is what's really cool is it talks about non-consensual pornography. But the truth is you don't actually know. You have no idea what the psychological impact is like for the person who's actually the victim. We don't have really anything in the history of humanity that sort of has allowed the human brain to experience this kind of thing. So 10,000 years ago when people were making cave art, if I wanted to draw a nudie picture about someone in the colony, it's cave art. That, who knows what psychological impact that has. Fake pornography is completely different. So I'm going to give y'all an example of I was trying to think about how could someone who has not been the victim of a deepfake understand what the psychological impact of a deepfake is. And so I was just trying to think about what can I do? And here's the best that I could come up with, and it's probably terrible. So imagine for a moment that you were given GHB, Rohypnol, or the date rape drug, or some kind of other dissociative or amnesia-inducing agent. So you have no recollection of it, and then you engage in a sexual act that you have no recollection of. Someone films it, and then you watch it the next day. What do you think would be the psychological impact on you if you saw yourself engaging in a sexual act that you have no memory of? Something about this example, I hope, makes you feel icky. I want to say that if you're someone who's said, oh, deepfake pornography is not a problem, when I share this, because this is the closest way that I can imagine to try to equate deepfake pornography to like an actual experience. Because this is what does it do to the human mind to see yourself having sex with someone that you never agreed to have sex with? I have no idea, and neither do you. The experts in this are actually the victims, because they're the ones whose brains are actually seeing this stuff. They're the ones who are feeling these feelings, and the research suggests it's actually pretty fucking bad. So another thing that I want to talk about is people talk about, consent. And so here's my take. I'm not an expert in legal stuff. I'm not an expert in politics. But generally speaking, it's my understanding that as human beings, we own our likeness, right? You can't take my face and plaster it on an advertisement for, peanut butter cups, right? As a human being, I own my likeness. I own my voice. I am entitled to me. No one else is entitled to me. And especially when it comes to things like streamers and stuff or celebrities, we sort of know that, right? Because people will pay for your likeness. So when we talk about something like deepfake pornography, what we are doing is stealing someone's identity. We're taking their likeness and we're saying, hey, I'm going to use it for something, and you don't get a say in that. I'm pretty sure that's consistently wrong. I'm pretty sure that is aligned with our views as human beings of what is okay and not okay. And generally speaking, as a society, we say it's not okay to use someone's likeness without their consent. The next thing that I want to talk a little bit about is the responses to people who have been through kind of a deepfake. And a lot of people will say oh, you don't have to watch it, or it's not that bad, or we'll also hear this, which is it comes with the territory. And that's also something that really bothers me because frankly, it doesn't come with the territory. What comes with the territory is what you sign up for. So if there's pornographic content about you on the internet and you are an OnlyFans creator who makes pornographic content, that comes with the territory. Streaming on Twitch, being a YouTube personality, being a celebrity, that does not entitle people to make pornography about said person. This is the whole point, right? As human beings, we have free will. We get to choose what we participate in. And we don't sign ourselves up for all kinds of random crap just because we choose to do one thing. So I don't buy for a second that when you are a streamer, you are signing yourself up and you are giving people license to use your likeness for pornographic means. I just don't buy that. I think that's fundamentally foolish and wrong and is not consistent with how we behave as a society. We just don't do that. And I don't think that any amount of privilege or money or likes or fame or whatever excuses people violating your rights. Just because I'm rich, which I'm not really, but just because someone is rich does not entitle you to steal from them. I just don't think that that's fair. That's not how we work. The next thing that I want to talk a little bit about, and this is going to sound kind of weird, but it really bothers me and scares me how little compassion or empathy there is for the people who are the first set of victims here. And we'll get to what I mean by that. So when someone is telling you, hey, this hurts me, and you say it shouldn't, And a lot of times the people who are saying it shouldn't, or you deserve it, or it comes with the territory, oftentimes those are men. I don't think men are evil. I think men are fantastic human beings. And yet when I hear men predominantly say things like this, it really bothers me for a couple of reasons that maybe you haven't heard yet. The first is that when we're talking about the damage caused by deepfakes, there are absolutely victims who are people like streamers or whatever, or revenge porn, non-consensual pornography, like it doesn't have to be a streamer. Those people are absolutely victims. But I'm actually worried about the people who are consuming deepfake pornography. I am concerned for their health and well-being. And I think a lot of the problems that those people face, deepfake pornography is not helping. So let me just give you all an example, okay? Let me think out loud about this. So right now, if you're a man and you're alone, there's something really special about content creators and relationships with content creators. There's this thing called the parasocial relationship. And I think the internet has kind of stumbled into this with influencers, where we have these parts of our brain that make us feel connected to other human beings. And if we look at what makes us feel connected to another human being, it's all kinds of stuff. So one thing that makes us connected to another human being is hugging another human being. When we hug or when we cuddle after sex, we get a release of this hormone called oxytocin in our brain. And oxytocin helps form emotional bonds. Oxytocin, anytime oxytocin is floating around, we bond with whatever is nearby. So it's really interesting, but when a newborn is breastfeeding, the signal that triggers the release of breast milk is actually oxytocin. So this hormone facilitates mother-child bonding. It facilitates emotional bonding after sex, which, quick side note, if you're trying to be friends with benefits and you don't want to catch feelings, don't cuddle after, because that's when the oxytocin kicks in. So this is one way in which we bond. But there are other ways in which we bond that have nothing to do with physical touch. So when we see someone be genuine, when we see someone be vulnerable, when we see someone who has the ups and downs of their day, that helps us form emotional bonds with them. When someone interacts with us, we form emotional bonds with them. So there's a community of people out there who are forming bonds with influencers. This is one of the outcomes of the internet. And why is it? It's because celebrities in the past didn't interact with you, right? You saw only certain slices, very curated slices of a celebrity's life. You see them in the movies, you see them on certain media interviews, but you don't get to see the day-to-day moments of the life. How do you feel connected to another human being? You feel connected when you see the day-to-day moments of their life. You see them crying, you see them happy, you see them sad, you see them bored. They resonate with you, and we start to form this bond. And what we're seeing is that parasocial relationships are damaging, not just to the streamer, but to the person on the other end. Because when I start to form this false bond with someone else, I can never get what a real bond should get me, right? That person is they're never going to listen to my vulnerabilities and shortcomings the way that I'm going to listen to theirs. There's never going to be hugging. There's never going to be cuddling. There's never going to be holding hands. There's never going to be going to dinner together. And as I sort of almost become addicted to this parasocial relationship, it becomes harder for me to engage in real life. And this becomes a vicious cycle, because the harder it is for me to become engaged in real life, and this is what we're seeing, is there are a lot of lonely men out there who are forming parasocial relationships, lonely women as well. The harder it becomes for me to engage in real life, the more dependent I become on this parasocial relationship to fit my emotional needs. And this is crushing a generation of people, because I'm getting so addicted to this zombie relationship. It's a half relationship. It's not a real relationship, but it's all I've got, and I can't give it up. I've seen parasocial relationships destroy marriages. I've seen parasocial relationships lead to inceldom. I've seen all kinds of negative impacts. And the deepfake porn makes this worse, because now what we've managed to do is check one more box in the parasocial relationship. Not only do I understand this person, I know this person, I've seen them at their highs, I've seen them at their lows, I've been there for them, they've talked to me, and now I can get some kind of sexual gratification in a sensory manner relating to this person. And I think this is going to make the parasocial relationship worse. So I'm really concerned for the people who are actually consuming this content. I'm not saying that they're good people or anything like that, but I think it's important to acknowledge that, and I'm not going to use the word victim, but I think that they are damaging themselves too. This almost feels to me like a situation of like being a smoker and secondhand smoke. Sure, it's bad for the streamer involved, but it's actually damaging for the person who's doing this kind of stuff. And if you're someone who watches deepfake pornography or has these parasocial relationships, I want you to really like stop and think a little bit about, what is this doing to you? What is this doing to your life? And because what I'm hearing is so much like victim blaming and like, oh, it's not their fault, they should have thick skin. Like, but think about yourself for a second. Does advocating for deepfake pornography or watching deepfake pornography, what does that do for your life? I can't imagine that because you're watching deepfake porno, your like life is full of like fun and games and things like that. What it's actually doing is like taking advantage of a very, very core psychological need, which, by the way, is why it's so fucking paywalled. Because people are desperate and they're willing to pay for it. Why are people willing to pay for it? Because it's so much more damn addicting than regular pornography. Why is it so much more damn addicting than regular pornography? Because there's all of this other psychological relationship, parasocial crap involved. So y'all need to be careful. The last thing that I kind of want to touch, or one other thought about this, is from the person who's in the deepfake porn. This is kind of a situation where I don't know if this is a good analogy or not. Sure, so this is like people who are consuming are like the smokers, but the people who are the victims in the porn are getting the secondhand smoke from every single smoker out there. So it's like secondhand smoke isn't that bad, but when there's 10,000 people who are all blowing their secondhand smoke in your face all at once, that is devastating. That is what leads 50+% of people to suicidal ideation after unconsensual pornography is released. So this is like psychologically incredibly traumatic. And I don't think people quite realize this is something that we haven't really understood until we started working with tons of streamers, is that the human brain is not designed to deal with vitriol and hatred from like 100,000 people. That's just not what we're made for. We're made to like deal with like 150 to 300 people. And when we scale things on the level of the internet, one person watching deepfake porno may not be that bad. But when it becomes 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 people, all of that starts to weigh on the person involved. And this is exactly why non-consensual pornography is so bad, because this is a case of even if you're not famous, it's stuff that's being spread or about you, right? And if you're someone who is like, oh no, this shouldn't be a problem, I don't understand why people are complaining. You think about a single time in your life, and hopefully for the sake of learning, this has happened to you, where someone was talking crap about you and other people were hearing it. And how did that make you feel? And now you amplify it literally by 10,000 or 100,000, because that's what happens in scenarios like this. When people dogpile a streamer, this is what the experience is like. The amount of hatred is just so high. It's like human beings are not designed to deal with this. The last thing that I want to talk a little bit about, let me think about this. Oh yeah. There's one other thing that I want to talk about, which is the problem with the lack of compassion for people who are victims. So there are a lot of people out there who are saying, hey, like, people signed up for this, y'all deserve it, it's not that bad. And in that moment, if you're a dude, which I'm assuming that most people who are saying this kind of stuff are dudes, and my apologies if that's not fair. In that moment, you are demonstrating a complete lack of compassion and empathy for another human being. And chances are the reason that you feel that way is because people have treated you that way. Right? So if we look at people like who are like incels or like lonely coomers on the internet, like a lot of y'all honestly are struggling. We know this because these are the people in our community. They come to our community, they say, help us get better. And we do that, right? We do our level best. Our subreddit was an absolute mess for some amount of time because these people were coming in. And a lot of people were like, ban these people. We did not ban those people. Did we delete comments? Sure. Did we sometimes ban people for violating rules? Sure. But we banned people for violating rules that we had set out. It wasn't discrimination against these people. And by the way, if there's a set of rules and you come and you break those rules and you get banned, that's not censorship or discrimination. That's you broke the rules, so we're not going to let you play the game. But going back to like what really bothers me about this, or I think what we need to acknowledge, is I want you to like look at where your lack of compassion is coming from. Why is it that when someone says, hey, this hurts a lot, this is what pain looks like, this is devastating for me, why is it that you can't hear what they're saying? Because chances are you have probably experienced the exact same thing that that person is experiencing. Because I would bet money that if you are an asshole towards people who are victims of non-consensual pornography, there have been times in your life where you told someone else, hey, I am really suffering. And everyone ignored you. What did people tell you, especially if you're a man? You don't deserve to suffer. What are you complaining about? It comes with the fucking territory. Because this is what we tell men who suffer. You're privileged. Right? And so what happens to us? We hear this stuff. We reach out for help. We say, hey, I'm hurting. And the world turns to us and says, screw you. You should be able to handle it. Comes with the territory. And we become so resentful that when another human being gets hurt, we take all of that resentment and we dump it on them. Hurt people hurt people. Right? The world has treated us like shit, so we're going to turn around and treat other people like shit. I want you to really think about whether this applies to you or not. Because this sounds really bizarre, but y'all are the people that should actually be the most understanding of the victims in this scenario. Because you're the one who's actually been there when you've been hurting and not a single person listened. Everyone said you shouldn't be feeling pain. What the fuck are you complaining about? Y'all should be the ones at the front of the line supporting these people because you know what it's like to have the entire world against you. And when I see this level of resentment and vitriol towards people who are clearly hurting, there's really only one explanation in my mind that rises to the surface, which is that you've been there and no one was there for you. So you're so freaking resentful that you're going to pay it forward. And so I'd strongly encourage you to think a little bit about this and think about where the resentment is coming from. Why are you so willing to discount other people's experience of pain? Because that's what you were taught. And to be blunt, this is the kind of thing that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you're a dude who's lonely, has a parasocial relationship, can't find a girlfriend, has been rejected over and over and over again, what do you think is responsible for that? I know a lot of y'all want to blame feminism. And I'm not saying women are perfect, but an attitude that completely lacks compassion and is devoid of empathy is the fucking reason you can't get laid. That's the reason. Just think about it for a second. It's not because women are against you. It's because when someone else is suffering, how do you respond to that? So we're going to talk to sweet Anita today, and I'm thrilled that she's agreed to like have a conversation about this stuff. But I mean, like, this is bad. And this is what terrifies me about the world. Like, I used to be scared of climate change and nuclear war, but honestly, it's stuff like this. This is what's going to destroy humanity. We have somehow figured out the source code of the human brain. And people who don't have your best interests at heart are capitalizing on that source code. They're taking advantage of you, right? Because like, why is everyone paying for this? It's because it's like so friggin' addictive. Why is it addictive? Because it takes normal pornography and it adds a relationship component to it. But what it's giving people is a half-life. It's like a zombie relationship. It's not real. It's damaging you and it's damaging that person. And we've got to be really careful because the rate of technological advancement, we're like playing with fire and we don't even realize it. We're like screwing our dopaminergic circuitry, like people are struggling. Suicide rates continue to climb. Men are in crisis right now. I saw a staggering study that over half of men may not be mentally ill when they kill themselves. Right? Like women don't know how to trust men. And that I don't blame them for, because here's the thing that you have to understand. If you're a man who feels judged because a woman won't give you a chance, think for a second about what must have happened in that woman's life, where her brain is telling her, we cannot trust men. And this is what's really bizarre is men are becoming better and better at deception. And the better that men get at deception, the more adaptively mistrustful women will have to become. And that can go both ways too. Right? So when men become more emotionally manipulative, which is what a lot of these like manosphere, like red pill types will do, they will teach men how to become emotionally manipulative. And what does that do? As men become better emotional manipulators, and they're like training programs that you can sign up for this, what women are going to have to learn how to do is become distrustful. And that's what we see. And then a bunch of other men are out there saying, no one's ever giving me a chance. And before blaming the woman, start to understand why. And I know it sounds absolutely weird because I don't know if I'm pissing everyone off or making everyone happy. But I think we're all screwed in this. This is something that we're doing together. We're screwing ourselves. This is like smoking in secondhand smoke. This isn't, the real tragedy here is like, are women victims? Absolutely. But like, we're the ones getting damaged as men too. This is not good for anyone involved. And the place that honestly I think y'all need to start is if you see another human being, a woman suffering, because I'm sort of talking about men because I think there is a gender imbalance here. If you see another human being suffering and your instinctive reaction is you shouldn't feel that way, I want you to look at my face. You shouldn't feel that way. That's what you're going to be feeling. That's resentment. Where does that come from? Why can't you be capable of compassion? And the same is true of women as well. Right? If a man says, hey, I'm suffering, my life is hard. If you discount that, where is that coming from? That's also coming from resentment. I can't believe this man is complaining he's privileged. And I have been the recipient of male privilege or the disadvantages of male privilege my entire life, which is where that resentment comes from in women. Y'all, I cannot stress this enough. We are screwed unless someone starts being nice to someone who doesn't deserve it. We're going to keep going down this road, and boy, are we fucked. Things are going to get worse. Mass shootings will continue. Sexual violence will continue. At some point, we're going to see a female mass shooter. Mark my words. That's a divide that we're getting closer and closer to crossing. We need to help each other. We need to support each other. Because anytime I look outside, I don't see that one group of people is like, yay, my life is so easy. Everybody's getting crushed. And the only way that we get through this is if we work together. Check your impulse before you tweet at someone who you think is a POS. Right? No snowflake thinks it's responsible for the avalanche. And if you are someone who thinks that the world is going to hell, if you're a man who thinks that feminism has destroyed the world, or you're a woman who thinks that all men are evil, this is what's really bizarre. You are a piece of that equation. Right? There are men out there who are hurting right now that as a woman, you can demonstrate some amount of compassion. As a man, if some woman demonstrates compassion and you catch feelings for her, that is not an excuse to violate her boundaries. We both have, this is not going to work unless it's an all hands on deck kind of thing. So I encourage each and every one of you to really think about your reactions. And in my mind, it is unequivocally wrong to engage in deepfake pornography. Right? This is the data is clear that it's quite damaging. Anyway, rant is over. Yeah, so if you 1993 is saying except for the 1%. Yeah, I mean, sure. But the 1% can suffer too. Right? So this is exactly what I'm saying is there's one group of people that we all love to shit on. But what I'm saying is it's a winning strategy to have compassion and empathy for all human beings. Doesn't mean we should excuse people. So should people be held accountable for their actions? Absolutely. All right, we're going to hop in with Anita. I need to figure out, I need to make a new scene. So stay with me, chat. 1 second. We're going to go here. Oh, then do that. That's not going to work. Give me 1 second, chat. Technical difficulties. Smashologist is saying, I miss you, seeing you struggle with technology. Yeah, I'm working on it. Yeah, thanks. I think I got it. I'm actually going to do a display capture. Display 2. And then we're going to do this. 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 This. There we go. And then, hello, Anita.
Hello.
It is awesome to see you. Thank you so much for... Okay, can you all see this? Are we good? Oh, I can't hear anything, though.
Oh.
Oh, no, there we go. Say something. Count to 10 for me.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
Thank you so much. That's perfect. Okay. Yeah, so thank you so much for staying up late. I know you're in EU time. And but I'm
a night owl. It's absolutely fine. I'll be up till like 6 a.m.
Okay. But I'd love to just get your thoughts about everything that's going on with like deepfakes, and if you have any perspective to add.
How much time have you got? I feel like I have so much to say. It's a really hard thing to broach because I feel like most of the people who are watching right now, like as in onlookers to the whole drama from start to finish, I feel like there is a distinct lack of empathy, and that a lot of people cannot actually visualize what about this is so painful and damaging. And so I'm seeing that we're being met with a lot of confusion as to like, what's the harm? Why do you care? This just comes with the territory, these sorts of remarks. And it's really difficult to articulate. And unfortunately, a lot of, I'd say like, I'm struggling to find a single woman who hasn't been assaulted or had some really heavily traumatizing experience with a man. And one of the symptoms of having experience with that sort of thing is being numbed, being overwhelmingly numb or disassociating when things like this happen. And it's really, really hard when everyone's trying to get you to explain what's so damaging about it, to get in touch with those feelings in the immediate aftermath of finding out that it's happening. And I think that's probably something that quite a lot of us have in common who've experienced this, whether we're streamers or not, is that when you're immediately asked to justify why you're hurt at a time where you're most likely to be very numb and struggle the most to articulate how you're feeling.
That's a fascinating point. I mean, because my first question, just as you started talking, like the first question that popped into my mind is, how is it damaging? So I have no doubt that it's damaging. I've seen overwhelming research, and I've worked with some people who have been in non-consensual pornography situations. But is it okay if I ask you, like, are you able to provide some insight?
I mean, I feel like when I first saw pornography that was made out of someone's likeness, it was Anita Sarkeesian, and she made a series called Feminist Frequency, and a popular streamer disliked her. So he basically mobilized his entire viewership against her. And she just reviewed computer games. And people started photoshopping her face onto pornography, and specifically sex acts that were considered degrading, to mock her. The first instance I had of this was not someone whose lonely and parasocial, wanting to masturbate over someone that they are
Hmm.
emotionally connected to. My first experience of this, my first knowledge of it existing, was as a weapon to humiliate and degrade women. So I've only ever known it as an attack. I've never really, like, this is the first time I've ever seen it or heard it described in a parasocial sense. And obviously I understand it. Like, I explained it to my audience as well. I was like, I'm pretty sure that we have a saturated market of boobs and that you can see boobs whenever you like for free on the internet. Um, but what people crave and what's much rarer is intimacy.
Yeah.
And so when you pick someone like your boss to get deep faked, and people submit pictures of their bosses to deep fake and their friends and family, like these are the kinds of things that deep fake markets play into, and a lot of the paid transactions happen for. So I get it. I understand that these are people who want a sense of some semblance of connection, and it's a pseudo connection. It's not real. But at the same time, I am very, very, very aware that there is a mix of dominance and humiliation tied into this. That these people are expressing a desire to dominate and humiliate me. And even the people who pretend that they don't get it and go, I don't understand, what's the harm? It's just a cartoon, it's not real. A lot of studies have shown that if you get a person, if you get a man and make him play computer games, and he's playing against another player who he can't see or interact with, if they give that person a male avatar and he beats that person, or he gets beaten by that person, that male avatar outdoes him, he will be given a chance to adjust the avatar of the opposite player after being beaten. And if it's a male character, they don't add anything sexual to the avatar. But if it's a female character and that
Hmm.
character beats them, they'll add sexual attributes to their avatar to mock and ridicule them and take them down a peg. There's a huge desire for porn of lots of different body types, not just the stereotypical beauty standard anymore, because people are out there looking for someone who looks like their neighbor or someone they know personally. And there's a huge appetite for porn where an employee humiliates their boss by sexualizing her and, by so like I feel like on some level, even if it's unconscious, a lot of the people who pretend they don't know why it's weird or upsetting
Hmm.
would do this unconsciously, would respond to being dominated by a female or outperformed by a female by doing this. And a lot of the studies tried to find like the same behavior in women towards men, and it isn't there. Generally speaking, most women will not sexualize a man who's outdone them or humiliated them or overpowered them or is like in a higher position at work. So I find it spurious. I question whether people genuinely don't get it or whether it's just a gaslight. I
Interesting.
just I have I'm suspicious of people who pretend they don't understand what's wrong with this.
So I can maybe offer some explanation there because, so on the one hand, I take things at face value, but I had a lot of trouble empathizing with people who have been in this scenario. So like it's taken a long time for me to learn to just accept if people are hurt, that they're hurt. But I think a big part of why it could be hard for men to understand this is because we may not respond the same way, or we believe we may not respond the same way, simply because we have not experienced a sexual objectification. So I try to put myself in this person's shoes, and I ask myself, hey, if there was a picture of my genitals on the internet, like how much would it bother me? And even amongst men, like, the pictures of genitals are freely advertised, right? Like sometimes we'll send them to people because pictures of our genitals being out in the public is not something that would bother us. I'm saying us in general, not. But so I do wonder. So it's really interesting to hear you say. I mean, I do think that there are a lot of people who probably understand on some level it's harmful and just don't care. But it's kind of like almost leaning into what you said, is that men don't get objectified quite as much, and therefore we may not understand what the harm is if we haven't experienced it ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways that I have, because I've experienced that too, that disconnect, and it's that if I posted pictures of my genitals on the internet and it spread, people would change their behavior towards me significantly. The minute that I seem sexually available in any way, shape, or form, I'm fair game to humiliate, physically assault, rape, and attack. Um, and this happens to porn stars. There are many porn stars who get murdered on their doorstep because a fan of their work will think that they're easy and that they will just sleep with anyone. So they'll turn up and go, "Hey, I'm here. You should sleep with me." And they'll be like, "Who are you? Get off my land." And they'll be like, "How dare you? You're a whore. You'd sleep with anyone. So why are you turning me down? What, I'm not good enough for you? I'm better than all those men you've slept with, and you'll sleep with anyone. How dare you insult me like this?" And then they murder them. And that's happened to so many, that exact scenario has happened to many, many sex workers. And so there's this idea that the minute you are consensually sexual, everyone can help themselves to you.
Hmm.
And I've experienced this and I've seen it, and I've seen it happen to other people. There are there are so many ways I could describe the way it changes the treatment of you and the consequences.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
There was a woman who had um she was camming with someone. So she was doing something sexual on the screen for this person. They recorded it and leaked it, and it ended up on a revenge porn website, and lots of people saw it. And all her friends were messaging her, going, "Have you seen this?" She begged them to take it down. They did not. She had 2 children. And the deep fake, it wasn't a deep fake, it was just revenge porn, but it was used against her in court to say that she was not a fit mother. And so, because someone leaked that footage without her consent, she lost custody of her children.
Yeah.
That it's also used against women in rape cases. So, if you get raped, police will spend months doing a background check on you and decide whether or not you could have ever possibly been raped. Because if you've had too much sex, you're obviously consenting. There's no way you couldn't have consented. So people will decide whether they believe you when you report a rape or a sexual assault based on your sexual history. And if you have any sexual content out there of any kind, you'll be considered a whore. If you once had a stint of doing OnlyFans or whatever to make ends meet, and then you start to be a teacher and you train for years and years to be a teacher, you can be fired as a teacher because you once had a career in OnlyFans. So there's this idea that once you're a sexual person as a woman, like maybe if you had a picture of your genitals out there, nothing would change. No one would care. In fact, the revenge porn websites that were releasing and keeping all of these pictures would quite often target musicians and show pictures of their genitalia. And nobody changed their behavior towards these rock stars and these males who were on the site.
Hmm.
It was purely the women who had physical consequences, who were fired, who were stalked, who had reams of men, because it didn't just leak the revenge porn, it leaked your details as well. They'd go,
Oh,
"This
yeah.
lady
So
from here."
I was looking at some research
Yeah.
that showed that 50% of things that are uploaded to revenge porn websites have names and locations attached to them. Right? This is an older study, so this study's like 5 years old, but and so it's like the revenge porn comes with the doxing, which is terrifying.
Yeah. And
So
so like that if I saw a picture of someone's dick and was given then their address and their number, there is no part of me that would want to go ring them up and go, "Hello, I saw your dick." But for some reason, when we do that with women, there are lots and lots of men who will dogpile on that and go, "Ha," and then immediately start harassing her just because they've seen her naked and they now have her details. So
and
like
what's your understanding of like why people may think that that's okay?
we stigmatize female sexuality as a flaw with them.
Okay.
I think we stigmatize female sexuality quite a lot. So men can gain status from sex, but women lose it. And it's even defined to how we treat women medically, our understanding of their sex. So
Help me understand that last statement. What do you mean by it affects how we define people medically?
there are loads of ways in which we pressure women and their lifestyles. Like I constantly am being told, I will run out of eggs and I will regret my entire existence if I don't lower my standards and get with a man now. Like, I have people who hop in my chat and say, what are you doing with your life? Stop dicking around in front of the camera. You need to find a husband before you're too old and left on the shelf, because you've produced all of your eggs and you're at the end where you won't be able to produce anymore, and you won't be able to have kids, and you'll die alone, and you should panic because this is your entire worth, right? And we found out very, very recently, through chemotherapy, that the idea that women produce all of their eggs in the womb and then that's it, that's all they have, is a myth, because there were people who were supposed to be rendered infertile by radiation, and their eggs actually recovered, and they produced more eggs after the radiation therapy, after the chemotherapy. And this was a revelation. Women can produce more eggs? What? And yet we've been using this pseudo fact that we assumed without any further research. I mean, I'm pretty sure this could have been very easily found out. I'm pretty sure this could have been found out much earlier. But every woman who goes through chemo is being told, when we do this to you, you won't be able to have kids, you know? And so, like, I am being pressured, and have felt this pressure my whole life to change my mind about not wanting children, because it's been considered a biological fact that I will run out of eggs and things like this. So I have to go and find a man, and I have to be loyal to him now. And so, like, there are lots of biological facts and medical facts that aren't actually true about a woman's body, like the idea that your vagina gets loose if you have too much sex, and then you'll be all too used up and no man will want you. And like, these things are being presented as medical facts. I'm being told females can't pair bond if they have too many sexual partners, so I won't be desirable unless I settle down with one man. Like, these things are being used against me, and then used to say that I'm used up or somehow less of a woman or less worthy. And so, like, it ties into like our medical understanding of human beings, and we use that as if it's fact to justify mistreating women, saying they're used up, saying that they're leftovers.
So can I just add a couple of things to that? Add some, maybe push back a little bit. So the first is that this idea that having sex with different penises loosens the vagina is like, it's patently false, right? So there's this there's a very simple experiment. Like, if I eat big burgers and I eat lots of different food, it's not like my face ends up, like, if I'm taking big bites all the time, it's not like my face is like wobbly afterward, right? I can take as many big bites as I want to of burgers and hot dogs and salads and sandwiches, and it's not like my face is loose and it can't like chew food. Like, it's just not. I have no idea where this comes from. It's not. When you say it's like we use no, that's not biologically accurate. And I don't understand what the biological difference is between having sex with a lot of different penises and one penis over and over and over again. Like, that's physiologically the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's no. Mm-hmm. And so some of that stuff is just false. I think that what I tend to see is that for a lot of discussions around this stuff, like, people's understanding of medicine and biology is very wrong. So that you're kind of like too old and stuff like that. From the medical standpoint, I'm not actually so surprised that for a long time we believed what we believed in medicine. I think that's actually still largely true. Because the chemotherapy makes me think probably what happened is you're giving someone chemotherapy first, and then you're giving them another agent afterward, which stimulates stem cell production. And if you artificially stimulate stem cell this is my sense, if you artificially stimulate stem cell production with a certain medication, you may be able to make new eggs. That makes actually perfect sense that could happen. But I wouldn't go as far as to say that our medical establishment may have been wrong, but I think there's a lot of data to support that a lot of the oogenesis or egg development happens actually before birth. But
say that we become like that we only have a short period of time to have kids has been used against women to pressure them, and there are whole cultures that call women on the shelf or leftovers after 25 based on the idea that they're at their most fertile when they're young. And it's been a justification to molest young women who aren't fully developed under the guise of saying, I'm getting her when she's most fertile. It's natural. So I do think that medically we deliberately misunderstand how women's bodies work in order to justify assaulting them, degrading them, and considering them lesser. I think that's well documented.
Yeah, so I think there's a nuance there. I'm not disputing at all that people will use biology to justify negative or harmful actions. I just think that these are incorrect biological assumptions, or they're being co-opted for like poor purposes. So even if there's a certain window in which women can get pregnant, which I think we sort of biologically understand that that's true, that there's something called menopause after which it's very hard for a woman to get pregnant. And there's something called puberty before which it's very hard for a girl to get pregnant. The biological facts and using biological facts for justification are two completely separate things in my mind. And in my experience, a lot of the people who are using biology to justify something actually don't understand biology. Just like this penis thing. Like, it makes no biological sense. Like, there's no data. Like, where is that coming from? You know, it doesn't make any sense. And so even people who say that, oh, like women are at their maximal fertile, that may be a biologically true fact. But that doesn't justify any kind of behavior, or the value judgment that we place on it is like completely different in my mind. And that's where maybe we agree to disagree. But like, I'm not disagreeing that people will use biology, but it's my experience that most of the time when I hear people saying shit like that, they actually have no idea what they're talking about. They actually have the biology like very wrong. Even if they're justifying it for whatever, it's just that they just have no clue. Like, they don't actually understand biology. I don't know if that...
Regardless of like, because I can give you a long history of like medically what's happened to women because of stigma towards women, but I think like it's beside the point. I think like the main thing is that I feel like the reason why you having a dick pic leaked and me having like any lewd pictures leaked, the reason why we'd have different set of consequences and why there might be a disconnect is both social and personal. And that is that a lot of women have personal experience of being dehumanized, mistreated, and being put in danger the minute people consider them to have a sexuality. And this is really emphasized in sex workers who quite often go missing or get murdered all the time, and nobody cares about them because they're whores. Like, it's very rare that it's ever investigated when a sex worker gets murdered by her clients, for example. They disappear, no one looks, no one cares. And that, you know, this whole idea of a pure victim changes whether or not people believe someone who has been assaulted, whereas like someone who's had sex 1,000 times with 1,000 different men could still say no to one of them and end up being raped. And yet it's still used as evidence in court as to decide whether or not a woman has been raped or not is her sexual history, things like this. So I think like there's that aspect, and then the overarching social aspect that people don't really consider is that men are not often considered sexual beings, and they do not have their sexuality positively acknowledged. So, for example, they're rarely ever called beautiful. They're rarely ever admired for their sexuality in the way that women are. So women are hypersexualized and men are undersexualized. And so when women get hypersexualized and it's a danger to their safety and it feels degrading and terrifying, a lot of men can't empathize because they picture themselves being lusted after by lots of women, and they'd love that. They'd love to be sexually acknowledged. And so like, and for women, they're like, I wish it would stop. I would give anything for it to stop. So when men complain about not being sexualized and not having their sexuality acknowledged, being turned down for sex by their wives, not being called beautiful, remembering compliments for years because it happens so fucking rarely, the women are like, why would I sympathize with you? That sounds like heaven. Like, and so
that's a really great point.
It's really hard to empathize with the opposite position because there's a certain level of envy. Like I envy men who can go unacknowledged and be invisible on a casual walk on a summer's day. Whereas I have to weigh up, do I want to be baking hot and sweaty and uncomfortable, or do I want to be in danger? Because those are my two choices. And so I feel like that's an aspect of why this is happening in front of mainly a male audience, and they have no idea how to empathize.
I think that's a really cool way of framing it, Anita. Like, can I just echo what you said? So it's such a good point that women are sexualized, or I would say, even my experience has been, it's not just sexualization, but appearance and compliments. Women are judged based on their appearance, even if it's not sexual. So sexuality is certainly they're hypersexualized. And I've met so many men that, and now it's kind of clicking for me, like a couple things after hearing what you were saying. One is that I've met so many men that do remember a single kind thing that was told to them years ago. Like they don't get compliments. I remember my own experience of starting to receive compliments at some point in my life and being really, really confused and thinking that people were making fun of me because I had grown up to be at best ignored and generally speaking ridiculed or insulted for my physical appearance. And so it was really confusing for me at the beginning. And then the other really interesting thing, just kind of thinking about how different our experiences are. So on the one hand, men are sending dick pics, and I'm not saying all men, so I think a lot of us are decent men out there, are sending dick pics unsolicited to women. And on the flip side, they're paying for boobs, right? So the idea that like if 1,000 women started sending me boobs tomorrow, a lot of men may think that they would like that kind of thing. And this is where I have worked with some men who have been sexualized, and this is where like they learn real quick that it's not the grass is greener kind of thing that they were thinking. In fact, it's very degrading. And just like it is for women. And so interestingly enough, the men that I've worked with that tend to be hypersexualized really, really hate it. And they basically will have experiences that are very similar to women. Yeah, that's a really interesting point about the lack of compliments and how we treat people. That's great. Helps me understand so much.
The way that I've bridged the gap for my male friends who don't quite understand and don't empathize with me is I go, stop imagining loads of women doing this to you. Imagine men doing this to you. Imagine going into a prison and having to work there, and all the men there, maybe most of them weren't done for rape or anything sexual, but you don't know which ones have been done for something sexual. And they're all looking you up and down and licking their lips and wolf whistling at you and going, come on, sweetheart, come closer to the bars. I won't bite. And you have to endure that every single day and work around them and not know what's going to happen to you. That's what we're experiencing. You were imagining loads of women fawning over you, complimenting you, being desperate to sleep with you. No, we're dealing with the prison scenario. Imagine that. And then they get it. Then it clicks. If they imagine having to deal with male lust, they suddenly understand the discomfort so much better.
Yeah, I think it's the huge point there. I think it's a brilliant analogy. Is a big part of it is like, do you want this sexual attention? And the whole challenge that a lot of women face, and some men too, is that they don't want the sexual attention. They don't want to be sexualized. I'm not interested in a sexual relationship with you. The scenario is not imagine that people are lusting after you, that you are lusting after. That's not the scenario. The scenario is imagine people are lusting after you that you are not interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is very enlightening. Thank you so much for sharing all this stuff, Anita.
Thank you for having me. I think like the thing that I've noticed is that this has been going on for so long, but nobody's ever taken it seriously or ever cared. And like I said, a lot of it's been used to attack people that you dislike, both male and female. Usually watching someone get shafted was a way to humiliate them. We even draw caricatures of politicians being in sexually degrading situations in order to humiliate them as an expression of hatred for them. And so, like, historically, since this whole thing has begun, it's been a way to humiliate and debase and kind of degrade someone's popularity and things like this. I mean, one of the earliest examples I can think of is in the medieval times, there was an outbreak of people persecuting witches and burning witches. And they used to use paintings. They made caricatures of women kissing the ass of the devil or licking the ass of the devil. So there are actually medieval paintings of like analingus as a way to say like witches are evil, they're terrible people, they suck up to the devil, you should hate them, you should find them, we should burn them. Like as far back as I can think, when it's drawing people in sexually compromising positions has not just been a fantasy, it's specifically been a way to justify harming women. It has been something that we've ubiquitously throughout history used as a humiliation tactic. And so like I find it really strange when people then do that for hundreds of years to the point where it's such an established thing. The amount of time I've seen Trump being done in the ass by Putin as a caricature by so many different artists. Like, how do people not know what this means to the artists and what their intentions are towards the esteem and like the social standing and everything of the subject matter? Like, this is a thing that has existed for so long, but also we predicted it into the future. Like, I recently tweeted about how Star Trek and Deep Space Nine had a holodeck where you could simulate realities, and how some of the characters got in trouble in various situations for simulating people they knew and putting them in sexual positions.
I've seen those episodes. TNG, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and Deep Space Nine, like they did a really good episode on it where the Ferengi, who are known to be heavily misogynistic, there was a client who wanted a holodeck simulation to sleep with Kira, and so he's stalking Kira, trying to get good pictures of her face so he can transpose it onto like a model to sleep with in the holodeck. And he finally gets it all together. They clock onto what he's doing, so they replace it. They change it before he sells it so that it's his face on a female model, so that when the client goes in and opens the curtain, he thinks he's going to sleep with a simulation of Kira. He sees a simulation of a woman with a Ferengi head. And so like in that situation, they wrote that whole situation for her to be angry, and she attacks Quark for this. And like they empathize with her. They know it's humiliating. The whole situation is set up to say like he's trying to stalk and humiliate her for his own profit. And she's angry and it's not okay. And then like the generation that was raised on this sci-fi is asking me why I'm bothered about being deepfaked.
So what I'm hearing from you, Anita, is a very central point about the usage of sexual material, or how people interpret sexuality, and almost it like gives people license to violate people's boundaries, to treat them unwell. That we as a society are also using sexual material to dominate and humiliate people. And so what I'm kind of hearing you say loud and clear is, hey, hold on a second. When we've got political cartoons that have Trump and Putin doing things or other people doing things, it's clear that when sexuality gets entered into the picture, it denigrates, humiliates people. It has real consequences. And by the way, I've read research that mirrors a lot of what you're saying. So it's really interesting. But the number one reaction to women after revenge porn is how they adjust their life. They start to live different ways, or not just women. So 10% of men as well will change the way they live. They change who they see. They change how they commute. They change how they walk down the street. Their whole life changes based on this kind of thing. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because if sexual denigration is associated with all of these things, including if you're viewed as a sexual object or you put out or you're sexually active, that entitles people to a particular access to you, then I think you're making a very strong case of forget about the emotional impact for a second. The real life impact is quite profound in terms of how you're treated, how you're not taken seriously by law enforcement, how it gives people license to crap on you in a particular way, even in terms of the medical establishment, which I'll own, by the way. I mean, like even things like the diagnosis of hysteria being related to the womb is a really good example of just like people not really understanding women or having empathy for their like experience of things.
I mean, the fact that back in the not medieval, in like, I think it was like the 1800s, you could literally get clinically diagnosed for a fingering or a vibrator from your doctor. Like, the first vibrator ever invented was by a doctor who would cure hysteria. So when men were horny, it was considered like a natural thing. But when women were horny, it was considered hysteria and something that needed to be cured and a medical condition. Like, that's how much we dislike female sexuality, that we just consider it craziness for her to have sex.
I mean, I completely agree with you. I think there's another layer to this, which is that I think the reason that it was such an effective treatment, I'm not disputing that it was an unfair way to characterize problems and diagnoses and treatment. But one interesting takeaway I remember when I was doing my research on this is how much better the mental health of people can become when they start having orgasms, right? So if you just like, how much does orgasm improve mood? It actually improves mood quite a bit, especially if it's consensual and stuff like that. Unclear about things like masturbation and stuff, but sometimes it really helps. And so I can sort of see a perverse logic to hey, I discovered this device, and this is a doctor who does not know what a female orgasm is. And he's like, I've discovered this device and it seems to help people. And I will apply the device, and then they will shake for a while, and the hysteria has left the body. The humors have balanced. And it's like, they didn't know what an orgasm was. It's ridiculous.
And it's funny how that knowledge was lost and found, wasn't it? Because the upsuck theory of like female orgasms and the motion of the Kegel muscles tugging up the semen into the womb and it being necessary to arouse her first in order to conceive was actually an idea that originated in ancient Egypt. And so a few thousand years before, it was considered absolutely integral to reproduction to give her an orgasm. And then by the time we get to the invention of the vibrator, somehow knowledge was lost and forgotten. And we think, oh, what's wrong with her? She must be crazy if she wants sex. Like, how does that happen? Like, how do we keep having to rediscover that women like sex? That's also an interesting U-turn.
What is this upsuck theory? I've never heard of it.
During various times throughout history, it was considered when a woman climaxes, there is a Kegel motion that does this inside her body. And so they theorized that had evolved, or that mechanism existed to pull semen deeper into the body and, through the cervix and into the womb. And that the upsuck technique is this idea that the function that a female orgasm has is to ensure conception, like that it actually has a function in regards to moving sperm. And so that idea, that theory has existed for an incredibly long time, and it's actually it's documented throughout the ages. Like there have been recommendations for this, including in ancient Egypt. So that was the upsuck theory.
I'm not sure exactly what happened in the West. I know that a lot of people will talk about Abrahamic religious influence. I don't know how fair of an argument that is, like Puritanism and things like that. But, in the East, I think sexuality was viewed quite differently. So in Japan and stuff, it was, and, from my culture, there's the Kama Sutra, which is, and actually one of the major goals of life is Kam. So there are 4 reasons why human beings exist on this planet. And one of them is actually the satisfaction of material desires, which we've been okay with. But even in India, the same thing kind of happened. There was this puritanical kind of wave where a lot of those old concepts got buried. And there's some kind of cultural influence that happened where sexuality in India is very repressed right now. And there's a lot of really bad, it's not just now, it's been happening for hundreds of years. Now there's more awareness of it. So there's sexual assault is really, really bad. And even by police and stuff in some regions. And it's can get pretty bad out there.
We have the same thing here in the UK. There has been a mass wave of scandals regarding even the police sexually assaulting people and getting away with it in various ways and having hundreds of victims, knowing that there's no one to report them to. They're the police. So this has been quite a serious issue here as well. And we have less than a 1% conviction rate for rape here. So of reported rapes, very few of them actually get a conviction in court. So yeah, it's I feel like it's something that's quite widespread globally, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I have one kind of maybe tangential question. So a fair number of people that I've worked with will complain about being friend zoned over and over and over again. And let me know if this is a little bit too off topic, but one of the things that I've kind of noticed is that sometimes men are so, this is kind of a hypothesis I'm putting forward, is that men are so starved for companionship, compliments, etc., that anytime an even remotely sexual object provides them with that, they sort of really jump into romanticizing or sexualizing this person. And I've noticed a correlation between people who are compliment starved and complaints of those same people being in the friend zone. Do you have any thoughts or experience about that?
Yeah, plenty. I mean, I have quite a few male friends because I have a lot of the places I socialize are very male dominated. Gaming, climbing, axe throwing, do all sorts of everything I've ever gotten into, every hobby I've ever had, I've been surrounded by men. So I make a lot of male friends. And one of the things I'll say is, yes, the compliment thing is a problem because like I like to compliment people. I like people to know that they're being seen in a good light. I had a lot of social anxiety growing up, and I was always feeling deeply embarrassed about things people didn't even notice, but I was so sure that I should be insecure about. So whenever I get the opportunity to put people at ease and let them know that they feel they are appreciated, I will, in a platonic way that I could totally get away with female friends, and they wouldn't assume anything of it if I liked their nail varnish or if I thought their hair looked great or things like this. But with men, it's much more difficult, and I feel like I'm walking on eggshells because I feel like sometimes, well, most of the time, men are not taught social skills as well. And then even if they are taught social skills, they're not taught what is a cue for a woman to like them or not. Like if you go, how do I know if a girl likes me? WikiHow and things like that will tell you if she touches her hair, if she laughs at your jokes, if she makes eye contact with you. It's like, what? So I have to look at the floor, never laugh if you say something funny. It's a try not to laugh challenge or I'll get fuck zoned. Because like from the opposite side, it feels like fuck zoning. If you don't fuck me, I'm wasting my time and I'll leave you as a friend. So I feel like when like there's two sides to this, right?
Anita, I've never heard this hypothesis either, which I think is brilliant, which is that half the problems in the world today are caused by men learning social skills and dating from WikiHow.
Yeah. I mean, like I've got on chat because like people, there was this study that said point out all the women who are flirting with the photographer, right? And in this study, most of the men just picked all the women who were smiling. They couldn't tell the difference between a woman smiling and a woman coming on to the photographer, like in the photo. So like I feel like we don't teach men what a reciprocation looks like. We just don't. And I really noticed it a lot because when I was a child, when I was a teenager, they'd be like, I don't get it. You laugh at my jokes. We spend lots of time together.
Oh, yeah.
We have these long chats. I thought you were into me. You've been coming on to me this whole time. And I'm like,
Leading
this is
you on.
This is, yeah. And this is friendship. I'll be like, no, this is just friendship, dude. I thought you were my friend.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, if you ask them, hey, are you coming on to me? They deny it. But then they're still mad at you. Like a lot of them are too embarrassed to say that they like you directly. So they'll say it indirectly in ways that would be considered friendship from a woman. And so like I will happily spend one-to-one time with a friend. I will talk about deep things. I will care about them. I'll be a source of emotional support. And some men don't get a lot of that from their male friends because it's considered gay or effeminate or just uncomfortable. So they take the piss out of each other and they test the boundaries of each other as a way to play and have fun, but they don't really go deep into like what's troubling them, or they don't look for support from each other or admit when they're feeling weak or upset. And so when guys feel comfortable enough to do that with me, they see it as a form of intimacy, whereas I see that as surface level friendship, because among females that's normal. We are taught to be communicators. We are allowed to develop social skills. We are given opportunities to emote and share ourselves, and it's not considered humiliating or debasing. So we bond and we develop social skills and empathy in a way that men are getting denied by certain ideas of masculinity. So if you have like a toxic idea of masculinity, if you have like a really traditional dad who pressures you and goes, boys don't cry, don't play with that Barbie, people think you're gay, all this sort of shit. And so you grow up in that environment and you don't know how to relate, and no one's ever supported you before, and you don't know what that looks like. And it looks like a special relationship when you make a female friend. It looks like you have an intimate connection, because what is just the basic moral human default of support and friendship to a woman comes across as intimacy to a man in that situation.
I saw this dichotomy kind of in an interesting way. So I one time had a patient who was crying about a moment in their life where they felt like really good, and their girlfriend filmed it and thought it was beautiful, because this is like a man talking about, like this was a time in my life, and like I was afraid that this was going to happen, but it turned out. And so it was like just a deeply emotionally vulnerable moment. She shared it with her friends because she thought it was beautiful. And the dude like absolutely flipped out. And it occurred to me, like, since I've worked with men since then, I've sort of realized that it's almost like what the way that women feel vulnerable, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's a certain vulnerability around sexual parts in terms of women that men don't feel in terms of their sexual parts. Where we feel really vulnerable and embarrassed is actually emotionally. So
Yeah.
this is where, since then, I've talked to some men, and I think this has had some decent effect, where I try to explain to them that how would you feel if someone took your, like when you were crying because you were whatever, and someone shared that with the world, like how would you feel? Like you're comfortable doing that with your partner and the people that are really, really close to you. But if someone shared that with people, how would you feel? And that's how women feel when when you share their genitals. They're like boobs or things like that. And that's been one thing that I found to be somewhat effective. I don't know if it's actually accurate. This is just what I've pieced together in terms of what, and this is how, like, so emotional intimacy for men oftentimes has less to do with genitals and has more to do with, or intimacy has more to do with emotional vulnerability, which is also part of the reason why men will get confused in terms of girlfriend zoning people, because emotional vulnerability and support is part of a platonic relationship. But for some men, it's actually not. And so when you get that from someone, you think that you get that from two places, your wife or your mom. And the person you're hanging out with ain't your mom. Anyway.
And I feel like you asked me initially if I had any experience with the friend zoning thing. Yeah, I do. But I feel like I get fuck zoned because I'll have friends who swear down that they're not interested in me romantically, and they'll be supportive and they'll act like a friend for a while. And then they'll come on to me and I'll be like, whoa, no, dude. And they'll be like, okay, well, I need a straight answer. Is there going to be something more, or am I wasting my time? And they kind of make out like that if everything that we've, like a 10-year friendship was just a waste of time if it doesn't result in a relationship now. And that's hideous and upsetting. And I'm like, well, it's not going to result in a relationship. And then because I didn't fuck, I get put in the fuck zone. I'm no longer a friend because, or anything else. Like I get shifted out of the way in this weird little zone where I was a waste of time. And I thought I had a friend, but it turned out I had someone waiting for me to sleep with them. And they act like a victim and they make it all Shakespearean, like, woe is me, for alas, I have feelings for you, and it hurts me so deeply to see you not be with me and get on with your life. And so I need to know, do you like me, or I must go yonder onto pastures green? And it's like, no, dude, this isn't some tragedy where you are victimized if I don't sleep with you. You're literally saying, sleep with me or I dump you as a friend. And that's a horrible thing to do to someone. You're acting like the victim here. You're not. I treated you like everyone else. You watched me treat everyone else the way I treat you and assumed you were special. That's not on me. And that's not me hurting you. And that's not fair. And so, like, I hate the friend zone because it is a horrible description of a very manipulative thing to do. And that is to say that it's a zone you're put in that you can negotiate your way out of, that you can bargain with people and manipulate their feelings by being impressive enough, by giving enough gifts, by buying enough diamonds and fucking chocolates. And that's so insulting to say that you can buy my feelings, that love or attraction is negotiable. And they know it's not, because if a dude they weren't attracted to, or someone in an age bracket or a weight bracket that they weren't attracted to, was hitting on them and buying them stuff and giving them time and attention and going golfing with them and listening to their problems, all the shit they list to me. Like, I listened to your problems. I spent all this time with you. Are you saying I was wasting my time? Like, if someone did that to them, they know that feelings are not negotiable, that chocolates don't buy love, that that's not how that works. But they tell each other you can get out of the friend zone. You can manipulate and pressure a girl to like you, even if she said no. And that is, the friend zone is this creepy way of playfully saying, you don't have to listen to consent. You can ask her how she feels. And if she says no, and if she says you're a friend and puts you in this zone, you can force her. You can make her change her mind. And it's creepy. I don't spend time with people who use the term friend zone, because if they believe in the friend zone, they're a manipulator, but they don't even know it. And being in the fuck zone over and over again has been painful. Losing friends of years that I didn't know were never friends is horrible. And I'm the bitch in that story.
So that's interesting. I've never quite appreciated until you explained that how geographical the friend zone really is, right? Because if you think about it as a space, it implies that you can move out of it.
Yeah.
And even then, a lot of people will think that they've been moved into the friend zone. I have been friend zoned, right? So like that's like it implies that that's not where you started out. You didn't spawn in the friend zone. You zoned in, or were teleported to the friend zone, which is interesting because it implies once again that you can move out of it. And I've seen that frustration as well in terms of, so people will try to get out of the friend zone. And when I work with people like this, what I sort of see is that they're investing, and they're not seeing a return on their investment. And so then what they'll try to do is double down and like invest more and more and more. And then you build more and more resentment. And then the real tragedy is that that resentment carries with the person. They carry it with them into their other relationships. That resentment then makes it harder for people to be attracted to them, but can oftentimes evoke emotional support because you've got someone who's like, wow, I can see that you're hurting. Let me be compassionate to you because you're hurting because you're carrying a lot of resentment. And then feelings get tangled, and then the whole cycle kind of repeats. So interestingly enough, for a lot of people who have been chronically friend zoned, the way that I've seen them get better, and we've seen this actually a lot, is just in terms of letting go of that resentment. Like it has nothing to do with the outside world. It really has to do with what you carry. And this is one of my big complaints about a lot of the perspectives that we'll see kind of in the manosphere is that what I think a lot of people don't really understand, and this can be true of women too, by the way, is that their experience of the world is influenced by their actions. So if I get friend zoned all the time, that there's something I'm doing. So the most common thing is a fear of rejection that precludes people from making their intentions known early. And so then they fall into this thing where I'm afraid you're going to reject me, so I'm going to do nice things so you like me. And I'm going to stack the deck in my favor until I demonstrate to you that I'm so nice. And then when I shoot my shot, I'm going to have a 99% chance of success.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think we've kind of gotten a little bit off topic. I'm enjoying talking to you. I was just wondering, though, do you think that there's something else that people need to understand about deepfakes, non-consensual pornography? Is there anything else that you want to share kind of about your experience or your understanding or?
Yeah, I'd say like one of the things is that it's cool that people are starting to have this conversation and they're starting to empathize with the people who've been put in this situation. But I've not seen anyone empathize with the sex workers who have gone through all of the work it takes to be a sex worker, which is a lot. You have social stigma. It's really hard to back out and do any other job thereafter. You sometimes have to mutilate yourself to keep up with the beauty standard and be able to do your job. So you're paying for surgeries and they're agonizing, all of these sorts of things. And, it takes a lot of expertise. It's a really hard thing to do. It's very taxing on the body and it can be traumatic at times. It has a really high turnover rate. It's a really fucking hard job, right? And then you imagine you went through all of that to produce work and someone said, thanks, I want this, but not you. So we're just going to put someone hotter's face on it so we can have this piece of work that you put all of that effort into. But you're not enough. So we're going to make it look like someone else. And so like somebody had their work stolen from them, something that they had to dedicate their entire life to build around. Like being a sex worker is hard. And someone, their work is being stolen. Like my face is being used, but their body and their work is being used, and they're not seeing any profit from this. It's being stolen, and no one's mentioning them as also being a victim of this.
Why do you think that is?
Because people don't care about women who have sex. Like for the same reason we don't look into the murders of sex workers. Like, people don't respect them and people dehumanize them. When people masturbate over someone, they don't think about them or care about them. And so, like, sex workers are not just stigmatized, they're dehumanized because they're consumed. They're not a person in porn, they are a product. Even the way they're referred to is some slut gets fucked, and then you reference which hole they get fucked in. That's the way we talk about sex workers in porn. We don't talk about them and their names often, we don't humanize them. And especially with women, I rarely ever see anything like beautiful princess gets worshipped, receives head from two men at once. It's never like that. It's usually like some woman being horribly degraded and called names and slapped around. And so, like, if people desire to see that from someone, they generally don't empathize with them. I've even experienced in person people who've been attracted to me not empathizing with me. And so I feel like because we objectify sex workers, we don't think about their feelings or how they're affected by us. And I reckon that's a big part of why people like me and Cutie Cinderella and Maya have received, our name is everywhere right now while people talk about the effect it's had on us. But I don't know a single name of any of the sex workers who had their work stolen and who were considered not good enough, that their work wasn't sexy enough until we put someone else's face on it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you have any thoughts about how do we start tackling that problem?
It's hard because this has been so historic. People try to blame things like hookup culture and stuff for how hypersexual we are right now, but
I think it
I
predates hookup culture.
oh yeah, by thousands of years. I think we've been debasing and dehumanizing sex workers and women. Like, women have been spoils of war for millennia. So, but there were times of equality, and I think, like, looking back to the
Really?
times where we had, oh yeah, especially in my country, before the Christian invasion and the Romans, we had equality. Women were doctors, leaders, fighters, soldiers. We had ancestral swords that were passed from woman to woman. Um, like, women were considered equals. In fact, one of the tactics of war that the Romans did was ridicule the men for looking across at the women instead of down at them. And they're like, ha, you're not even men. You treat your women as if they're equal to you. And that actually caused a stir in our community and made men feel embarrassed to share
Well,
power with
do
women.
you do you mind sharing? I'm so curious. What community are you referring to? Like when you say my community, what is it okay
Then
that I ask that?
as in communities, as in people, British, like
Okay.
Celts,
Okay.
you know, the
Celts.
Anglo-Saxons and Vikings, like all of these groups, not just here in the UK, but like in Europe as well. Like,
Okay.
they've been documented. Like, there were Viking women who were fighters
Right.
and leaders, and they had standing and they were considered equals. It wasn't considered that women were property or just brood mares. Like, they were considered people. And so there was whole cultures that established long-standing equality that was robbed of them.
Hmm.
And so I would say, like, it is not this brand new progressive thing we need to invent. Like, this has it been established before and we lost it, which says to me that there was a time, there have been many times, many places where this wasn't a problem. And if we can learn more about those cultures, we can learn how it was established and how it was lost, and like what we need to get back to. I think it's a good question. Like, how do we deal with this issue where we consume and degrade, and we consider penetration to be a way to degrade people? And like, how do we get to a point where we can empathize with sex workers and things like this? And I think, like, a world where we segregate men and women is a huge place where we establish this resentment. I'd say the place where I would look to start it is the toys section of children's, like, toy shops and stuff like this, because there is a blue section and a pink section. It's so segregated. If you look at Lego, the early adverts for Lego, boys and girls were playing together with colored bricks. Now, if you look for Lego, you have to go to one side of the toy shop to find Lego for girls and another side for Lego for boys. And we segregate male interests. We project male things to do and female things to do on children and segregate us from each other. We're not playing with the same toys with each other. We're being told, this is what your group does over there. And if you try to cross it, the parents panic. They're like, no, don't pick up that Barbie son. Don't pick up the pink dress son. The kids at school will bully you. Boys don't do that. And they genuinely are fearful for their kids if they cross those boundaries that are incredibly new, right? And the issue with this is like, if you segregate us early, you get things like, I get people in my chat going, how do I talk to girls? It's like, we're people. What do you mean? We don't speak different languages. And they're not asking me how to like hang out with women and make female friends. They're not asking me how to talk to a grandma or like their niece who's like 10 or whatever. They're asking me how to be a stud, how to say stuff that will seduce women they're attracted to. They don't phrase it like that, but that's what they mean. And like, so they're like, I get scared and nervous when I talk to women. How do I talk to women in a way that will make them like me? How do I be a giga chad to women? What do you go for in a man? Like, they ask these questions.
I can't speak to this specifically, the people you're referring to. I'd like to defend some of the men on the internet there, where I think sometimes, so here's my experience of it. First of all, I think the world would be a way better place if dudes who had trouble talking to women spent a lot of time talking to grannies. Like, I think honestly, that is, I think, a brilliant idea.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I'm with you that men will struggle to talk to women. I do think, though, that some of that is like, there's almost like an exposure therapy around anxiety sort of thing, where I've worked with a lot of men that they're not just trying to be chads. Like, they really just struggle to talk to anyone of the opposite sex. And it's just super challenging for them. Like, their internal emotional experience is not, I mean, it may be like conditioned by society and judgment and stuff like that, but literally their like moment to moment experience of communicating with someone of the opposite gender who is anywhere in the ballpark of like dateable for them is very hard. And I think it goes back to kind of what you were saying, that these are skills that we don't necessarily explicitly teach boys. And I think that's actually even applying to girls now too. So I've noticed that the way that we're, especially in the digital age, like more and more women that I've worked with are having difficulty in social situations. And some of the stuff that you're kind of saying implies that, I'm not saying, I don't think you're actually implying this, but just to clarify, like, I think a lot of these challenges, socialization, even women talking to women, or how does a woman talk to a man without inciting girlfriend zone or things like that, that women are actually struggling with a lot of communication as well.
Like, I'm not afraid of rejection from men. Not because I think that they're always going to want to date me or anything like that, but because I don't identify and segregate men according to elderly men, fuckable men, and children. And like, I don't have this, like, I'm approaching a man and what if he doesn't want to date me? And what if he rejects me? I'm just like, there is a person, wonder what he's doing. And I go speak to the person. And I think, like, when I'm asked, how do I talk to girls? How do I get girls to like me? I don't think I'm really being asked, how do I relate to women? Because, like, that isn't actually a real question. Like, they're just people. Like, the answer to that is unanimously, and most people know this, they're just people. Talk about the things you're passionate about, listen to the things they're passionate about, talk to them like you would a guy. And if you can't talk to them like you would a guy, it's probably because you talk terribly about women to guys. So, like I mean, this issue is, like, I feel
that I would push back heavily against. So I do think, so I think this is where your conditioning has given you a particular experience where you can see people as people, right? But, like, that's the whole problem, is that there's a lot of people who see women as females. They don't see them. And a lot of them genuinely don't know. So how can, like, Anita, it's like, if I were to tell you, how do you start seeing your box as a person? Like, do you know how to start seeing your box as a person?
Because, like, why is it in question that women are people?
Exactly. That's my point. So some people actually grow up in particular situations where that, and this is what you've been saying too, is that if we look at how women have been objectified, A lot of people grow up in situations where there's strong cultural forces that do not, I mean, this is what you've been saying, is that there's strong cultural forces which do not shape people's perception of women as people. And so some people genuinely have difficulty understanding how to do that. That's why they struggle.
Which is kind of what I was trying to describe too. Like,
yeah,
that there's this category of fuckable people that might reject you, and it's like, I'm scared that I won't get what I want out of you. Like, that's how it sounds to a woman when you're saying, like, I'm scared of rejection.
So,
it's like,
when
that just means that you want to date them, and you're communicating with this nervous, tentative, like, how do I speak to you and get what I want? And it's like, but like, normally when the average person who's like socially adjusted talks to people, they don't immediately categorize this bar of people and go, I'm scared to talk to them in case they don't sleep with me. What if they reject me? Like, that's how it sounds. And so it's like really hard for me to empathize with, because I'm being asked, how do I get girls to like me? How do I get them to, what do I say? What's the cheat code into a girl's pants?
So let me ask you this. When you talk to men, what are you afraid of, if anything?
Usually I am not initially afraid of men. Like, to a degree that people are surprised by. Like, if I see a drunk man stumbling around in the street, most people would give him a wide berth. But on multiple occasions, I walk over and go, are you lost? Are you okay? Do you know where you're going? Like, I got told off by a police officer who watched my YouTube video where I was recording and talking about Tourette syndrome on the street. And I saw a man passed out on the floor. So we just went, oh, free friend. Picked him up, took him to a like well-lit hotel, sat him down, started talking to him, got him an Uber, found out where he lived, and got him home. I'm not afraid of men. I should be. All of my experiences I'd be justified in being afraid. I've had bad experiences with men, but I'm not afraid of them. I'm not afraid of being rejected by them. I'm not afraid of being attacked by them. I just see them as other people.
Right. So I think that's awesome that you're able to get that to that place. Having talked to a lot of women, I'm not saying all women are like this by any means, but a lot of women have come to have a default fear of men and consider men to be untrustworthy. And what my experience, having worked with both sides of the aisle, is that when men are afraid of rejection and women are afraid of being taken advantage of or pressured or manipulated or attacked, those fears come from experiences. And so it doesn't surprise me that you have difficulty empathizing with someone who's afraid of rejection, because you say yourself, you're not afraid of rejection. That seems completely, it doesn't sound like that's an experience that you've had a lot of. So it makes sense that you would have difficulty empathizing with someone who's afraid of rejection.
Rejected a lot. Like, I spent most of my life not being diagnosed with Tourette syndrome. So people thought I was crazy. And people didn't want to spend time with me. People were weirded out by me. Like, there's a scene in the Joker, the latest Joker movie, where he has a laughing tick on the bus, and everyone's side-eyeing him, and everyone's uncomfortable and scared of him. I was that guy for most of my life. When I tried to hang out in social groups, they didn't like me. When other kids were making friends, they wouldn't include me. Teachers would even reject me and not want to help me and things. I know what it is to be rejected.
So that's so interesting.
I understand.
Yeah. So then I'm a little bit, what about your experience does not translate into empathy for men who are afraid of getting rejected? So there's a difference there, right? Because you're saying there's like, these are apples and oranges. As I'm hearing you, that's what I'm perceiving. So I'm curious, what's different? I'm not disputing that by any means. So it sounds like definitely if you've had even if you had diagnosed Tourette's, like that's a recipe for constant rejection in schools, as well as professional situations and all kinds of other places.
Oh yeah, and to give you an example, like when I was a little girl, the first boy I ever asked out, he said, no, I would date you, but your nose is too big. And ever since, I've hated my nose and I haven't been able to get over it. And it really deeply affected me. And there was a time where I bought a guy flowers when I was young as well. And he didn't understand the gesture and went, I'm not gay. Why would I like flowers? And he threw them away. I think one day he'll wake up like in his 30s or something and go, oh, and realize what I was trying there. But for now, like, he was insulted, right? I've been rejected by boys and it traumatized me as a kid. It hurt me so much.
How is it that you don't fear rejection if you've been traumatized by rejection?
Because I feel like when a guy is scared to speak to me because I'm a girl and he's attracted to me and he's scared of rejection, I don't know anything about him. I've never met him or spoke to him. He's working up the courage across the room. And I've seen this scenario a few times. And what he's done is he doesn't know me. He doesn't like me. He's looked at me. He's lusting after me. He likes my ass or tits. That's it. That's all he knows, what my body looks like. And now he's scared he won't get what he wants. And he thinks that that's this cute, nervous, shy, nerdy thing. Like that makes him a vulnerable little squish who's so innocent. He wants to speak to a girl, but he's so afraid and nervous. But how it comes across to me is he's feeling a lot of pressure to get what he wants from me. He wants to get closer to my body. It's all he knows. That's where all of the admiration comes from. And he's scared of not getting it. He'll be humiliated if he walks up to me and I'm not immediately impressed and like him back the way he likes me. And it's like, I feel like that's a lot of pressure. Whereas, like, if these people knew me personally and they were scared of rejection, that would be different. And quite often that turns into the friend zone scenario. But often the men that I have bumped into and had experiences with who are scared of rejection are people who don't know me, people who just looked at me. And now they're like scared to talk to me in case I reject them. And it's like, why do you even want to get with me at this point? You don't even fucking know me. And you're scared that I'll turn you down. Like, I haven't even thought about whether or not I'll date you. Like, you're a stranger to me across the room.
How do you know? So it sounds like you have an understanding of what's going on in their head and judgments that they're making about, like, you're because you're saying that there's all this stuff going on in their head, right? Like they're placing all this pressure. They're like girlfriend zoning you. They're like, where do you get that understanding that this is what's going on in their head?
I've had friends that I have brought into my life and accepted who've talked to me about how they felt when they first spoke to me. Or they've talked about, I like this girl, I see her at the grocery store all the time, but I'm scared to talk to her in case she rejects me. And they know nothing about her. They're scared that she won't fancy them back immediately. Like, and that's weird to me. I don't get it. Like, that's not actually being rejected. She can't know you. How could she reject anything about you? She doesn't know you. Like, if you're gonna have one conversation with her and be scared you'll get rejected, like the most rejection you can get is that she doesn't want to hang out with you or isn't interested in the conversation.
Yeah,
That's
this makes
so
a lot of sense. So I'm now understanding. So I just connected a couple of dots. So if you believe, I would bet money that 90% of the men who are listening to this conversation do not believe that you need to be known to be rejected. So you just said, like, right? Huh?
Yeah, that's it. Like, I think you have to know someone to actually reject them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel rejected if someone tries to speak to me and they're like, they don't. Like, if I do small talk and I'm like, huh, nice weather we're having here, and they're just like, yeah, and they walk away. Like, I'll take that as they don't really feel like a conversation, but I don't feel rejected.
Yeah.
Because they don't know me or my intention.
I think this is awesome because I think this is huge. I don't understand exactly what the importance of this is, but I wonder if it has something to do with the dehumanization and it's hard. I can't put it together, and I've just had a long day, but something about the statement that you just made that you can't get rejected if someone doesn't know you. That runs contrary to so much of my experience in the experience. Like, you can get rejected so easily. And in fact, I would imagine that a lot of men that I know would agree that it's easier to get rejected without people knowing you. And I wonder if, huh?
Like, how? Do you want to expand on that? Because how? How is it possible to reject someone if you don't know them?
It's a good question. I'm just connecting these dots, so I'm gonna like think about it and see if I can get you an answer. But I think this is something that warrants further explanation. I wonder if it has something to do with. Let me just think. I think it has to probably do with the differential interpretation of one interaction. So if I ask someone to hang out and they say no, the reasons they say no could have nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Right? But I think especially men are raised in a way where a no results in like lower status. Like, so if I'm a dude and I ask out a girl and she says no, none of my friends care about the nuance. They don't care that she's a lesbian, or they don't care that she's not interested in dating, or she's asexual, or, you know, they don't care. What I get judged on is whether they say yes or no. And oftentimes what I may judge myself on, and because if you kind of think about it, right? So like also historically, men are the ones who are open to being accepted and rejected. Like even if you think about this idea of proposing. So like in that scenario, the one who's on deck to be rejected or accepted is the man. Like that's a common scenario societally. So on deck for acceptance or rejection is men. And I hate to do this. I'm going to kind of do it, but I got to add a bunch of caveats here, because I hate interjecting animal biology into humans, because I think for the most part, the human mind is so complex that a lot of like mating theory doesn't apply. Like, I just don't think that human beings act based on like observations of like animal mating patterns.
Yeah.
But if you look at a lot of animal situations, and humans are not different, where frequently it is the male who will be accepted or rejected. And I think that for a lot of the manosphere, like they read way too much into this, and they don't really appreciate that women have, it's not like high value men and low value men. Like women are thinking human beings that can mentalize and have complex internal environments, and who they choose to engage in a relationship with has way more than height and how much money they has. And there's actually overwhelming biological evidence to support that point. Because the truth of the matter is that most women most people who have relationships and will procreate are average. They're not exceptional. Which means that average dudes are getting laid and having families and having fulfilling lives all the time. This whole hypothesis that, oh, it's only the high value males that procreate, that's actually like factually very incorrect.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I gotta go. Hi, sweetie. I'll be there in a second, okay? Can you go close the door?
Wait, Pr0n wants to have two.
Okay, well,
I told him to stay on camera.
give me 2 minutes. Daddy's trying to make the world a better place for y'all when y'all are like 10 years older. Anyway, so I think it's interesting, and it's a beautiful question, Anita. I wish I had a better answer for you. That's the best I can come up with at short notice. I wouldn't trust that answer. I'm not putting my money down on it. But there's something about this whole idea of proposing where I think like acceptance or rejection it's sort of like the male part of the dynamic, which is sort of false because the woman also.
I'm a woman who initiates. I'm a woman who will only date a man that I've asked out. I don't accept offers. Like I've never said yes to someone who's asked me out. I only ever ask someone else out. And I lay that down for my friends. I'm like, if I've never asked you out, I'm not attracted to you. I don't like being hit on whatsoever. And a lot of them cross my boundary and hit on me anyway and justify it by saying, I know I didn't listen to you, but traditionally a man has to offer. And I'm like, to find out. And I've already said, you've found out if I've never expressed an interest in you, that I'm not interested in you. So like, I feel like where there's a disconnect here is that I don't feel like I've rejected someone for anything if I don't have time to talk to them, or I don't know whether it's safe to stop and talk to them in this alley. And I feel like I've not made a judgment of you because I don't know you.
Yeah.
And so I haven't rejected you, but you might feel rejected, and you might feel the consequences of other people perceiving you as someone who's been rejected, and that I am being held responsible for that, even though that might not actually be the case because I don't know you. I didn't make any assumptions based on you whatsoever. You've not been rejected by me because I know nothing about you. I haven't pushed out anything about you. I just couldn't stop for a chat. And so I couldn't give you a window to hit on me.
Yeah.
I couldn't give you a window to try anything. And I don't owe you a window to try anything either. Like this idea that I've rejected you, if I don't give you an opportunity to apply for a role in my life that I never even advertised, like that's not really rejection either. Like maybe I just don't want to be hit on right now. Or like maybe it is I just don't date people like you specifically. But then that's not actually a measurement of you. That's a measurement of my standards and my life and what I'm doing right now. And still you can't really take that personally. Like I wouldn't take that personally as someone who has put myself out there for rejection. Like I do get rejected. I don't take rejection that personally, and I don't see it as a measure of me whether or not this person says yes or no. And I feel like, I don't know, for me that just looks like maturity. I feel like that's a place you're supposed to arrive at when you're older. I don't know.
I would agree. I mean, so I agree with a lot of what you're saying. So I think your perspective is quite mature. I was going to use the word enlightened, but I think also this is the tricky thing, right? Is a lot of what you're saying is not the norm. So you kind of say, okay, I don't date people that I don't ask out, which is fair. Like you do you. And it's awesome that you've come to a place where you understand, you've dealt with rejection, you've overcome rejection, you've developed faith in yourself. You don't reject people until you learn who they are and you give them, in a sense, a fair chance. Not that anyone deserves that chance or anything like that. I think this is where things get really confusing because a lot of the dudes that I've worked with, it seems like they're trying to, and I think there are problems here, even in this thinking. The standard that you set is quite different from the standard that a lot of people set. And I think what a lot of the challenge is that something about being a man means that you have to meet other people's standards. You don't get to determine your own standards, which is exactly what I think needs to happen. So the journey that you've gone through is you've been through a lot of crap, and then you've decided through some amount of personal growth and a lot of suffering, this is the way that you want to live your life. For some reason, a lot of people that I work with, and this can absolutely be true of women as well, where a lot of women don't get to determine what kind of life they want to live. They don't get to, self-determination is not an option for them. And that's true for a lot of men as well, where it's like, I don't get to choose what makes me happy. My value is determined by my acceptance of other people, by other people's acceptance of me. And that's a story that especially boys get fed from day one, right? So a lot of this is making sense to me. I think your views are perfectly valid. I think it's great that you feel that way. And I'm also beginning to see how it could be hard for you to empathize with these people because I think you've come to a place that is foreign to them. But anyway. And this is where I've seen women who are like this too, where their value is based on meeting some kind of external metric, like the number of children I have, or being prom queen, or whatever. There are lots of women who have those kinds of things. And what I think the fear of rejection comes from people who are raised in that kind of idea that you don't have intrinsic value as a human being. Who you are doesn't matter. It's how you perform. How much money do you make? How tall are you? What's your body count? When you express interest in someone, do they say yes or no? Your value as a man depends on these variables. And I think that's harmful.
I think that's harmful too. Yeah. And I try to be the kind of friend, I don't rate any of my male friends by whether or not they get laid or whether or not they've been turned down. I have male friends who struggle with things like social cues, have been virgins their whole life, and I think they're cool as fuck, and I don't measure them by their sexuality whatsoever. And I have friends who are sex workers who've mated with thousands of people, and I don't care whatsoever. Sometimes it's really interesting to hear about their life stories and the things that they've experienced, but neither of these ends of the spectrum mean anything to me in terms of their value. And so it's so alien to me that people are walking up to me thinking, if they come up to me and they're scared of rejection because they think that I designate their value, that that's my responsibility, that whether I say yes or no or charmed or not defines everything about them.
That's such a beautiful point, right? So I think that the experience of women in this situation, I'm generalizing here, but is that once again, so if a man thinks that their value, and they've been conditioned to believe that, right? Because there are a lot of men and women who will judge them based on these things. And now what happens is it's terrifying because your value as a human being now becomes not part of your own agency, but how you were treated by others. And then what happens is they put the pressure on the women to accept me. Because if you accept me, I'm worth something. If you don't accept me, I'm worth nothing. And that's not a fair responsibility to put on the woman. Like, and this is how we get to, if you break up with me, I'm gonna kill myself. Right?
Yeah.
That our value becomes tied into how people treat us. And I've seen that a ton too. And so this is, I just need to sleep on this because I've learned so much today. And I want the opportunity to try to give you a better answer to what is, I think, a very important question.
I've learned a lot from you today, and I really loved the discussion. I feel like it got into like a whole other direction than I expected, but I enjoyed it. And I don't want to hold you anymore because I feel like you've got places to be and things to do. But I really appreciate being invited on today and talking about all of this. I hope we get to talk again because I always grow every time.
Same. I think you do just such a good job of articulating. A lot of people will talk about this stuff, but I feel like the way you put it together really helps me understand a lot about what people's experiences are. And I do have, I got stuff to do. And, but I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on today. I know that this kind of discussion can garner a lot of like unpleasantness. And this is where, once again, I think there's a gender dynamic here where I think the amount of toxicity that you may be opening yourself up to by having this conversation is probably different from what I'm opening myself up to. And I mean what I said earlier, even though I was kind of saying it jokingly, that I have 2 daughters and they're entering this world and I'm scared for the world that they're coming into. And I think that there's like a lot of dangerous directions of like where gender dynamics is going. And my hope is that more conversations like this will make things better for men and women both. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. And I hope you don't get flack or, hate. Are you still streaming? Can I raid you? Or are you?
I decided not to stream this one.
Okay.
But thank you for the offer, and feel free to raid somebody who.
Who should I raid? Can you please tell me?
Okay. How about Annie Fuchsia? Annie Fuchsia. ANNIEFUCHSIA. She's really lovely.
Okay, let's do it.
Wholesome.
So
Okay.
Thank you very much, Anita. Take care. Have a good evening, night.
Mm-hmm.
Adios.
Good night, everyone. Bye.
Gotta do this. Gotta do this. And then gotta do this. And then gotta do this. All right, chat. Thank you all very much for coming. Yo, so this was great, dude. Like, I feel like something about this is going to turn into some kind of finished product or plan to move forward. Especially this whole thing about, I don't understand how men can feel rejected. I'm not rejecting them. Girl, that's not the experience of men. And this disconnect, I think, is big. Resolving this disconnect, I think, will help a lot in terms of the self-esteem of men, will help in terms of the pressure that women face. Like, there's something going on here that's important. I just don't know how to put it together yet. By all means, y'all should be a part of this discussion too. So if y'all have thoughts about it, use Discord or Reddit or whatever, and like, by all means, share this stuff. If like y'all are women in the women's Discord, which by the way we have, and I hear is doing a lot better nowadays. Oh no, 8 seconds. Y'all should join that, and hopefully like y'all can share your experiences there. So take care, everybody. Thank you for coming, and we'll see y'all. Oh, gotta go.